Before starting this presentation, I need to advise new listeners that I'll be forced to use certain code words in having a discussion about the situation that the world is currently in. I'll be forced to use terms like CV. You know what that means? Sometimes just C to represent what's going on now. I might use the word V instead of virus. I can't mention things too many times. My words will be banned, censored, or eliminated from some platforms. This has been happening for some time now. What does it tell you about the world in which we're now living? I also would like to remind you that when the truth is presented, it will stand on its own because it's true. There's no holes that can be poked in the truth. Or if a lie is presented, or let's just say a manipulation, then it must be perfect. If you find one problem or flaw or impossibility with whatever story is being presented or whatever trick or manipulation is being presented, then by definition, the whole thing crumbles. The truth, the sun provides warmth. There's no one, no matter how good their argument, could ever bring that truth down. The sun provides warmth. Where a lie, the woman was really cut in half by a magician, that has to be perfect for it to be believed. If you see that the woman's legs on the left side of the box being cut in half has black shoes, and the woman who got in the box was wearing, say, yellow shoes, then it falls apart. It unravels. And although considering the stories we're being told about what's happening on the news right now are very convincing, if you let yourself get swept up into the fear of what the news peddles. And there are many things wrong with the official story of what's going on now. I'm just going to focus on one thing. Because again, by definition, one major reveal of a lie brings the entire lie down. One final note, especially if you're new to these sorts of conversations, as I'm making this presentation, you might think, well, wait a second, where's he going here? That can't be. That sounds crazy. See, that's jumping to a conclusion before allowing me to present the facts, the truth. The sun provides warmth. These are the types of things that I'm going to be providing to you. You must stick to the information, please, that's being provided at the time and not let your mind jump to a conclusion. Where's he going? That sounds crazy, so that couldn't possibly be. Please stick to the facts that are given in the order in which they're given. So let me get right to the present, lest I lose my audience because they're becoming very impatient. Hong Kong, as of July 2020, has 7 deaths. As of early June 2020, after this thing has been ravaging the world supposedly since the end of February, Hong Kong had only 4 deaths through the end of June. The premise is very simple. This is not possible if this thing that I cannot mention too many times in full because my words will be censored, this thing cannot possibly be what, say, the news says it is if Hong Kong has only 7 deaths. It's simply not possible. Hong Kong is one of the largest cities in the world by population. It is essentially 7.5 million people living on top of each other, with a population density that ranks 4th in the world. People living right up next to each other. Small, confined spaces, packed subways, packed buses, packed markets. These people, unlike people in New York City and other cities around the world, essentially have nowhere to go. Hong Kong has been isolated, was under British rule for a long time. People that live in Hong Kong ancestrally just don't have a relative that they can just pop over to mainland China and live with. The people that live in Hong Kong, because of its history, essentially have nowhere to go. Where we heard in New York, for example, people were driving north and south to be with relatives, to get out of the city, etc. Let me repeat the facts here. We'll go from there. 7 deaths. 7.5 million people living on top of each other in the 4th largest city in the world from a population density perspective. Now, right here is the most important part of this presentation for a certain group listening, anticipating what you're thinking now. Because it's happened time after time. I've approached a lot of people and said to them, what do you think about Hong Kong having only 7 deaths, with only 4 deaths through June, with 7.5 million people living on top of each other. And they say to me the same thing over and over again because they can't explain that away. But what most people do is a little bit strange. Instead of just, I don't know, just acknowledging the obvious and saying, yeah, that is strange. How is it that New York City has 22,000 deaths and Hong Kong basically is in a situation that's more crowded, that's more packed on top of each other, that's closer to the original epicenter, Wuhan? 7 deaths or 4 through June? Why can't they just say to me, Matt, who's making this presentation, that's really strange and that's worth looking into? They don't do that for some reason. They look for an answer, and the answers seem to satisfy them, but the answers don't really make any sense. And I'm anticipating the answer here if certain groups are listening to this, because I've heard the answer. I've asked many of you the same question, and you get things like, well, Matt, they know how to handle it over there. Okay, not sure what that means, and we'll discuss that. I've heard, well, Matt, they already had a mask culture. Okay, we'll discuss that. It still doesn't explain away 7 deaths, or it's just not possible if the news is telling you this thing is A, B, C, D, and E. If it's all that, then minimum, a place like Hong Kong would have 12, 15,000 deaths. Minimum. 15,000. Even if you do everything perfectly. Not 4 through June. So I must personally ask whoever's listening to this, what type of person are you? And there's 2 types of people, generally we find. The first type, unfortunately, is very rare. Someone that will just answer with what I'll call an intellectually honest reply or a fair reply. Say, Matt, wow, I didn't know that. 4 deaths through June? It doesn't make much sense. I'll look into it. That's strange. Thanks for providing me the information. But unfortunately, most people don't do that. They come up with some sort of an answer that will allow them to keep their belief set in the current authority or in the news, or Hong Kong knows how to handle it. We'll discuss that. They're already a mass culture. Like masks are some sort of panacea to stop all disease and all virus. When somebody sets off some spray paint right next to somebody wearing a mask, you can smell every bit of it. If you open a box of donuts up in front of somebody wearing a mask, you can smell every bit of it. And viruses are thousands of times smaller than the molecules of a donut flying through the mask. So even if they're helpful, even if that is recommended practice by certain medical professionals, it wouldn't be a panacea in keeping 7.5 million people living on top of each other from getting what we see now. Do you see? But the point here, let's just get back to the main point. It's why I struggle with people, instead of just being honest and fair and saying, well, wait a second, that is strange, Matt. I didn't know that. How come they don't talk about that on the news? To, well, they know how to handle it over there. Or just why do the people feel they have to recall or come forth with some sort of answer? Because they have to protect their view of what the news is telling them. If someone like Matt comes along and says things that don't make sense and don't fit into the official narrative, then if the official narrative and those looked to as authority are presenting things wrong, or worst case, actually manipulating the facts, then that's a much scarier situation than any virus. So in continuing to talk to just the group of people that when presented the information for the first time that Hong Kong only has 7 deaths, they immediately brought forth an answer. I have to speak to them now. And actually, many people that don't have an answer at their fingertips, like Hong Kong knows how to handle that for some reason, where the United States and other countries and cities around the world have no idea how to handle it. How to handle what? It's just a form of flu that everybody's seen throughout their entire lifetime. But that's what they say. Other groups will actually not come forth with an answer, but they'll say even something that's even more intellectually frustrating. They'll say, well, there must be an explanation. This is the highest degree of intellectual sloth that's ever been presented in human history. Well, there must be a reason. I just don't have the means to figure it out. There must be, if there was certain studies, Matt, or there was certain research done, I'm sure it could easily be explained. See, this is just an attempt to move it aside because it's a scary thing that's Matt's presenting, that what the news is saying about this thing may not actually be exactly correct. And I don't want my image of authority tarnished. So there must be a good explanation. And if the right people just researched it and looked into it, they'd come up with that explanation. But this is absolute a cerebral passing of the baton to the nth degree because it violates all common sense. I would say to them, no, there isn't a reason. We've all been sick in our lives. We've all seen the spread of things around classrooms. We know what happens. There is no possible explanation. I'm saying it's impossible. And to come to grips that it is impossible that 7.5 million people living on top of each other produces 7 deaths, if this thing is what they say it is. They told us it was the spread rate was far greater than any regular flu, and the death rate was far greater than every flu. And they listed all the things that we should be scared about, much worse than any regular flu. They told us in February and March and April. At the very minimum, to be intellectually honest, anybody that came up with an answer, like Hong Kong knows how to handle it, must say, Matt, I have to give that to you. For Hong Kong only to have 7 deaths, where they potentially had 10,000 people traveling back and forth to Wuhan, China, the epicenter, in November and December of 2019, it can't be all that the news says. It can't spread as fast as the news says. It can't be as virulent as the news says. Something is not right, Matt. I have to give you that. But incredibly, most people won't even give me that. They'll actually just think there's something deranged about what I'm saying, but I'm just presenting facts and common sense. What if, I don't know, something that they can understand? What if every elementary school in a certain region of Pennsylvania had a measles outbreak or chickenpox or whatever kids get sick with? But then the next state over, just, Delaware, you cross from Pennsylvania into Delaware, a little sign says, welcome to Delaware. Just a few miles away, nothing. But these kids play football together. These kids interact. They're friends. You would have to you wouldn't say Delaware knows how to handle it, would you? There'd be another reason, whatever that reason may be. Okay, because I've conducted this exercise so many times with so many people over the course of, say, 10 years, and of course not just CV, that's relatively recent, other things where I challenge what the news presents that people generally accept. I know what a certain group of people are demanding of me right now. They're demanding the answer. They're saying, okay, hotshot, well then what's the answer? You tell me. This is called, and it's unfair, take me to the last page of the book syndrome. Or you could call it, show me the story's ending syndrome. I'm not willing to read the pages in between or examine all that's in this book. You must take me to the final page. Let's turn to it now. And I need to know the story's end. It's not fair. And again, it's just another form of intellectual defense mechanism. Because what's real scary is probably the story in between. And they kind of sense or may sense that if I say the ending, or I tell them what I think potentially may be going on, that it will be so strange to them that they'll be able to use that to say, I knew it. This guy is some sort of a whack job, crackpot. So they'll use the ending to actually justify their ability to hold on to their established worldview. It's called, don't listen to the facts or the research or apply common sense or apply everything we know about how a pathogen or a virus or an illness works. It's just take me to the last page of the book. You explain it to me and show me the story's end. And if I have a problem with that, then I can use it to ignore everything you presented. I can use it to not ever have to intellectually again examine why Hong Kong would only have 7 deaths through July of 2020. All right, let's just take a pause, come at this from a little bit different angle. I'm going to talk about the movie Contagion, but it's important to note before I go any further that I'm using Hong Kong as the most drastic example of just a situation that doesn't make any sense. But there are others, guys. The amount of cases in India is ridiculously low if we live in a global economy with hundreds of thousands of people a day traveling major city to major city. I just looked up the number of deaths in China. It's been removed from Google. It had always just been around 4,000 deaths in China. Very, very low, just a rounding error of a rounding error. There are 4,000 people that die in China every so many hours of whatever. I mean, it's a country of 1.3 billion people. 4,000 deaths. It's a rounding error of a rounding area. More people may fall off roofs in China than died of C-19. But let's come back to this later. For now, I just want to describe the movie Contagion. I can't show you any movie clips. This video will be immediately banned and removed from all platforms if I do. But you don't have to have seen it. I'll describe a few things. But the way a disease or a pathogen or a breakout was described in the movie is generally how we would think it would work, and is generally consistent with us seeing the spread of disease and being sick ourselves our entire lives. Gwyneth Paltrow, supposedly case one. She flies, I believe in the movie it originated in China as well. She flies out. She then brings the disease into the United States or into whatever country she arrived in. We see people traveling internationally. Lawrence Fishburne and the people at the CDC saying, well, we got to get a handle on this, but there's already been potentially 1,000 people that have flown out of the epicenter and has basically spread it all around the world in 24 hours. The main scene is Gwyneth Paltrow landing on an airplane. She spread it to another country in less than 24 hours. Just to give you a feel for some of the statistics, how mind-boggling this is, how quickly anything that they tell us spreads like something we haven't seen in 100 years, how quickly it would have spread all over the world, probably in 2 days. LAX, Los Angeles Airport, roughly 170,000 passengers a day. Let that sink in. 170,000 passengers a day. Would it be any different for Beijing's airport or Hong Kong's or Shanghai's? Not 5,000, 170,000 passengers a day. There would have had to have been in December of 2019 a 3 or 4 week period where Chinese authorities didn't know what was going on. Just do the numbers. The hundreds of thousands that would have come and gone from every major city. That's fine if this is if they had described it as something extremely, extremely deadly, but it's hard to pass. But they didn't describe it that way at all, did they? They said it spread more than almost any flu we've ever seen. Guys, this is a common sense exercise. There is no getting around anything I'm telling you. The Chinese authorities, like some sort of demigods, did not pop up within the first 2 hours of the first case and lock down an entire province to save the world. Hundreds of thousands of people infected, whatever, would have gotten to all major cities. Hong Kong, 7 deaths. What did I say? 10,000 a day potentially traveling back and forth between Hong Kong and Wuhan? Maybe 20,000 a day. During the 3-week period that nobody knew what was going on. So when someone says they know how to handle it, well, there's a 3-week period where they didn't handle anything. They didn't know what was going on. It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm fine with somebody saying, well, Matt, I probably am not going to believe your final explanation for what's going on, but I'll give you that, Matt. This makes no sense. But it's amazing why people aren't willing to do that. And as I said earlier, it's not just Hong Kong. Tokyo, Japan, 320 deaths, 9.5 million people, much more crowded than New York City. Not even close. I mean, same people going to come back to me and say the same thing? I know how to handle it? What about the 3 weeks when nobody knew what was going on? What were they handling? India is a very interesting case. You look Wikipedia up, 22,000 deaths. That's not a lot. A country of 1.2 billion people, it's nothing. You might find more people have choked to death on their tandoori chicken since February of 2020. 22,000 deaths? Every other cause of death in India has surpassed C-19. And is somebody going to say, well, Matt, C-19 would have passed all the other causes of death if they didn't lock that country down? I mean, how are people coming up with this over and over again? So they locked India down. And if you look up the news stories, you'll see that they tried to lock the major cities down. You're talking about 300 to 400 million people living below the poverty lines. You're talking about massive slums in the big cities, massive slums. The slum by itself is bigger than most cities in the world. Areas around the regional airports, tent cities, no running water. People basically going to the bathroom in a hole. This is the case for 100 million Indians living in the big cities. It's massive squalor, massive poverty in certain big cities. 22,000 deaths. They just knew how to handle it. The Chinese authorities were coming by the tents in those slums saying, make sure, everybody here social distancing? It would have spread like wildfire in these types of situations and scenarios. Even Hong Kong. People think, I don't know, people in Hong Kong are these, everybody makes $150,000 a year, everybody has the ability to social distance, everybody cares, everybody is a scholarly type. Hong Kong has back alleys, they have criminals, they have prostitution centers, they have heroin dens, they have homeless, they have squalor and poverty. It's not, if you say they know how to handle it, you're assuming that every citizen is up to the task of handling it. It doesn't make any sense. Please, whoever's putting forth those explanations, drop your veils and please come around that there's something else going on here. I'm not going to tell you all that I believe. I just want you to see that there's obviously something else going on here. Finally, let me close with this. The lockdown situation. The situation where people are questioning rights, the ability to drive across a state border if you're a U.S. citizen, people coming forth with good rights saying there's nothing in the Constitution that says governors are allowed to take a podium and just suspend it whenever they want. We were told this was always, the Bill of Rights are always there for us. It doesn't just say in some sort of fine print in some of the opening articles of the Constitution that this is here, but it can go away at any time when governors take a podium and say it needs to go away. It just doesn't work that way. So let's talk about the lockdown and keeping people quarantined and things like that, and the necessary nature behind it. Of course, that's what most people believe. Mandatory wearing of a mask. There's no legal basis at all that this is possible. Well, governors can just impose this on people. But nevertheless, we're not going to get too much into that. Just talking about the lockdown in general and the need for it. Now, there's a lot of causes of death. Lots, like hundreds and hundreds. And there's things that just go by that cause 3 times the amount of death as C or CV. And not only is there no lockdown or no banning of the Bill of Rights, there's like no mention of it. 2019, 2018, this tuberculosis crisis, 1.5 million people died. Tuberculosis, 1.5 million people. Now, someone can argue that, yes, Matt, the C deaths worldwide are only about 500,000, but it's because of these lockdown measures, because of the constant quarantine, that the C deaths are 1/3 of the tuberculosis deaths. You know, whether I disagree or agree, that's not even the point I'm trying to make. Fine, I'll give that to you. Fine, whatever you want to believe there. That doesn't invalidate the point I'm about to make. The point is, these measures, even if you are a firm supporter in Pennsylvania, for example, of Governor Wolf, and you actually were on his campaign, even those people would say these measures are difficult. You know, they're very restrictive. You can understand people bringing forth constitutional questions, okay, even whether you're in support of it or not. But the big question is, well, with tuberculosis and other things that have come, why wasn't it even mentioned? In other words, if all that's playing out now is real and how a government really responds to disease, then why wasn't the tuberculosis crisis of 2018, why don't we remember it being like 1/4 of what's going on now? Oh, yeah, Matt, where there were outbreaks in certain states, they did have quarantine for a few weeks because of the tuberculosis, or they did require masks, or they did this, and there was nothing done. 1.5 million deaths, nothing. So why is it different now? See what I'm saying? And the only thing people will come forth with is, Matt, you don't really understand. If these measures weren't there, there would be not 1.5 million tuberculosis. If they knew it was only going to get to 1.5 million, Matt, then just like with tuberculosis, they wouldn't have done anything. But it would be 8 to 10 million if it wasn't for this. And I'm going to disagree with that, but that's not even the point. The point is there's a lot of things that harm people. And on all the other things, there are no measures. Lyme disease, the government doesn't even post a sign that says you probably shouldn't go into these woods without permethrin protection or DEET of a certain level sprayed up to the knee. They don't impose, that affects millions and millions and millions of people. Not that they die, but there's complications and things like that. There's no reaction from government in all these different areas, forcing a population to do this or forcing a population to do that, or making certain woods in Connecticut and Massachusetts and Pennsylvania off limits because they're afraid of people's Lyme disease. They just let anybody do whatever they want for all these other causes of disease and death. But for this, the whole world has to be locked down. Australians can't even leave their house for 2 weeks. Illegal in certain parts of Melbourne to leave your house in 2 weeks. How's that? They said, we have rights here. We have a constitution. I can't permit you. I can't prevent you from going into the forest. We have the constitution. Nothing on all these other things that harm people. But now, because of this one thing that, I don't know, maybe it's a little worse than the flu. Now we have the whole country and world into lockdown. Doesn't that seem odd to you? Whether you agree with a lot of what I'm saying or not, isn't that a little strange? That they didn't do anything and all these other things, but now the measures, now that the government has stepped in and they're a 10 out of 10 in terms of 1984 type jackboot intimidation and threat of imprisonment. You couldn't even drive Pennsylvania to Delaware without Governor Wolf said, we will pull you over and quarantine you. That's imprisonment. I only ask you to notice, isn't it strange this is going on now with this? Well, if this is what a government should do to protect people, and this is much more serious, of course, than anything else, well, why didn't they even do a little bit of this for the other things that have come our way in the last 20 years? Do you understand what I'm saying? People are watching this on the news and saying, Matt, it's about caring for people's health. Government needs to do certain things to protect people. They care. But then, you can prove McDonald's and certain foods like that kill not 500,000 worldwide, kill 50 million worldwide. Cigarette smoking, 50 million, 100 million worldwide. So, Matt, they have brought lawsuits and things against the tobacco, but then why we're talking 100 million dead. Why weren't the drastic measures in that area like we're seeing now? People locked away in their homes. Why aren't they at all consistent? What makes this different? Consistent, they would have, once they recognized, if they care about your health so much that they're locking people away in their homes now, forcing masks, abandoning the Constitution, abandoning the Bill of Rights, then they would have been somewhat consistent in the past and said, well, once we figured out that cigarette smoke kills people, we're going to have them all out of business by the end of the week. There's no consistency. What makes this different? Geez, that's where I'm begging you to think along those lines. It's completely inconsistent now with everything else they've ever done. It's all about health. Well, certain types of foods they've known kill millions, and even the public water supply is 150 white papers how it's a poison. Fluoride, chlorine, chloramine, other toxins in the public water supply. If they cared so much about people's health, they would have cleaned that up 20 or 30 years ago. Just begging you to see how strange and inconsistent this is. But people turn on the news and it all plays out as normal. Even the word or term new normal coming from Allstate or State Farm and other businesses. And this was introduced to us in March. Well, what does that even mean? Why would a business introduce the term new normal in March? Well, this virus might be worse than all the other flu viruses we've seen, but don't they just come and go? What are they even talking about? New normal. Why doesn't that get anybody's attention? I can't say much more. I've either gotten through to you a little bit to question what you're being presented, or I haven't. Thanks for listening.